Welcome everyone to this week's video. Today we are on Fish Friday number 230 and we have a good one for you today. Today's fish is a fish that I am honestly surprised we have not talked about, and I'm very surprised we haven't done any of this group of fish, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about as soon as I show you the fish. Today's fish that we're going to be talking about is the great hammerhead. Now, the great hammerhead, or scientific name Sphyrna macaron, again, that's Sphyrna macaron, is part of the family Sphyrnidae, which is the family of hammerheads. And we have not done a real hammerhead video yet, which was just honestly surprising because it is one of the more iconic sort of shark species out there. As soon as you say hammerhead, people immediately get a picture in their mind of what kind of sharks, what that is. It's not like it's that impossible to envision what a hammerhead is. And this, the great hammerhead, is one of the essentially stereotypical hammerheads. So let's kind of get into this. Now, the great hammerhead is found in tropical waters all around the world. All around the world, but tropical, so around the equator predominantly. Essentially from the tropic to the tropic, of course, tropical waters, and they're usually found closer to shores. They're usually found in waters between 1 and 80 meters in depth, which is 3 feet to 260 feet in depth, which, when you're talking about sharks and oceanic fish in general, 260 feet deep is essentially shallow. They might as well be on the surface of the water. They're very, very shallow dwelling species. They do prefer to be in coral reefs, but they're kind of found in all habitats. Continental shelves, mangrove swamps, flats, but they really like being close to coral reefs. Not necessarily completely on coral reefs 100% of the time, but relatively close to coral reefs. And that's not necessarily surprising because, as we all know, coral reefs are definitely a center of biodiversity and essentially prey species for this fish. Now, the great hammerhead is I should also say they are actually semi-migratory. During the winters, they'll move from the equator kind of closer towards the poles during the summer. So they're most likely following what their biology determines as the proper temperature in the water. So moving from the very hot equatorial waters to those more northern or southern waters is going to allow them to sort of follow a slightly cooler temperature in water. Now, the great hammerhead, as the name would suggest, is a very large fish. It averages around 3.5 meters long, which is around 11 feet, and weighs around 230 kilograms, which is 510 pounds. That's a very large fish. However, the longest great hammerhead that was ever on record was actually 6.1 meters, which is 20 feet. And the heaviest known great hammerhead that was ever caught was 4.4 meters, 14 feet long, and it weighed 580 kilograms, 1,280 pounds. A very, very heavy fish, which, as you can, if you remember, the average being 510, that almost triples the body weight. And what's interesting is that hammerhead was caught in 2006. So it's not anecdotal evidence. We've talked about how, there have been records or reports, of hammerheads getting up to this or sharks getting up to this. And those are anecdotal evidence, which is basically someone wrote down somewhere, we saw a great white this long. And there's no actual documentation to really back it up other than just visual records. This one was caught in 2006, so it had plenty of pictures and evidence supporting that. And what's interesting is that, yes, it weighed almost triple the average great hammerhead, but it weighed that much because this shark was pregnant. When you start getting into hammerhead sizes, the larger the fish is, the more likely it is female. And that fish was actually pregnant with 55 neonatal pups, meaning she had 55 essential babies inside of her. So as you can imagine, that would help a lot with the weight. I don't have it what the weight was after the pups were sort of removed, or if they were even removed. I don't really know anything about that shark, if it was caught and released live, if it was caught while actual fishing, or anything like that. But it is, you know, it was very, somehow either through x-rays or MRI imaging, they knew that she had 55 neonatal pups. Now, in terms of sort of the body shape, it has that streamlined body with the expanded cephalofoil, which would be the head. And basically, the great hammerhead is your typical hammerhead shape. And the shape of the cephalofoil is kind of indicative of what species you're looking at a lot of times. The great hammerhead has a straight cephalofoil, whereas some of your other hammerhead sharks are going to have a curved cephalofoil. In size of it, you can imagine that obviously this big honking thing at the front of the skull is probably going to be pretty indicative in terms of what species are a good diagnostic character. But the great hammerhead is your kind of typical hammerhead shape. It's important to note, though, that hammerheads, have a very cylindrical body. You know, when you think of like your white sharks, those have a very thick front part of the body, and then they taper to a much more narrower caudal peduncle. Whereas the hammerhead is very cylindrical and doesn't necessarily have that real thin caudal peduncle. Is it thinner? Yes, but it's kind of got this arch back, moving back here, and then, you know, it's still a very thick caudal peduncle. Now, the cephalofoil that hammerheads had, it's a very important. That's what gives its hammerhead shape. And it's very obvious when you think about it. This fish would not have evolved with this thing if it was not beneficial to them. And it does so many things. We could do an entire video on just what the cephalofoil does and what it is, but it's essentially, you know, it increases so much. It increases vision. It gives them very good stereoscopic vision. It helps with maneuverability, and it allows for better sensory reception. Because remember, we've talked about sharks. What is one of the interesting things sharks have? They have what are called the ampullae of Lorenzini, which are electrosensory receptors really focused around the head shape. And, you know, you think about sharks that don't have the cephalofoil, it's very concentrated, meaning they kind of have a limited scope, versus a cephalofoil allowing the receptors to be spread across the entire head gives them much better pinpoint accuracy on how these receptors are. In terms of color, you've got this dark brown olive back fading to white, with no real modeling or anything. It's essentially kind of in terms of color, it's kind of boring, essentially. In terms of, you know, these are an apex predator in terms of their predatory things or instincts. They have very long, not long, but very triangular, serrated triangular teeth made for tearing. It is solitary, nomadic, but a very apex predator, and it really likes stingrays. And it's very interesting because the venomous spines of stingrays do not seem to bother the great hammerhead. In fact, many great hammerheads have been found with the spines of stingrays embedded all around their mouth and their head, and they seem to be just fine. It's really kind of interesting when you think about it, because some of those stingrays' toxins are actually pretty bad and can be very, very harmful if they hit you. Now, it's predominantly hunting in the early dawn or you know, morning and night, so it's more that kind of a crepuscular sort of species. Really finding those stingrays that are buried in the sands, using that cephalofoil, sweeping it side to side to try and find those stingrays that are buried in the sand. And they'll actually use the cephalofoil to actually help with holding a stingray down. There was an interesting little tidbit found where Hammerhead knocked a stingray to the bottom and kind of pinned it down and swiveled around and took some bites out of the stingray to essentially cripple it, and then proceeded to finish eating it. So the cephalofoil is actually very, very important. But for the interesting fact we're going to end the video on, or at least the thing that I found the most interesting, is that these sharks kind of exhibit a very peculiar swimming behavior. A 2016 study found that specimens really reduce drag and dramatically lessen how much energy they take by swimming, because they'll swim on their sides. If they are not in active hunting mode, basically, this great hammerhead will swim on its side, and it's a term called rolled swimming. So they'll roll on their side using the dorsal fin to provide lift. And it's actually been documented in captive specimens, and a lot of people were kind of confused. But it's using its dorsal fin to provide lift, and it's using the cephalofoil to sort of kind of cut through the waters. And it's using its tail to really propel its body, with power, as it would imagine. Now, obviously, when it's hunting, it's got to go kind of straight because it's using those deals. But it also allows the shark to have even better stereoscopic vision, because once it turns in its sides, it's going to be even easier for the shark to look both above and below it without getting away. Sorry, I hit my mic. So when you tack on the fact that it's very efficient, I think I saw some evidence saying that it reduced energy expenditure by up to 15%, which does not seem like a lot, but when you're talking about your entire lifetime, it adds up quite a bit in terms of how much it probably saves in energy. And spending 90% of their time in that swimming orientation, obviously they really enjoy doing that. Now, I didn't see if they favor one way or the other, but that's actually kind of a neat way to think about it. More than likely they go both directions, so that because if they just stayed one direction, you would probably have more musculature on one side, and so that'd be a very interesting further study, and it may come out later. But very, very interesting sort of peculiar swimming pattern that I definitely was unaware of. But thank you guys so much again. I really appreciate it. Hope to see you again. If you'd like to, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. If you do, I'd really appreciate it. Hope to see you again. Amazing year. Got another one coming. I hope you enjoy this. If you'd like to support the channel, please click the link down below. It is by no means expected, but very much appreciated. Regardless, take care of yourselves. Take care of your loved ones. Happy early Christmas, everyone, and peace.